Thank you, Sue, for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for staying for the afternoon to enjoy this session with us. So Shelley and I will do this talk in two parts. I'll take you through the first half, and then she'll take you through the second half. Okay, I've done this. So what I'll do first is to introduce our unit as Health Policy and Economics at Insight Health Solutions, and then also share with you what our ambition is as Insight Health Solutions, and then briefly highlight the challenges that we're facing in our healthcare system in South Africa and what we propose as a solution to some of the challenges that we face. And then Shelley will take you through the process of how do we democratize HTA in South Africa. Wow, our unit is quite new. As Christoph mentioned, Insight has grown a lot, and this year there's been Insight Health Solutions, which was launched, which is headed by Tebogo over there, and our team consists of 2 health economists that are supported by an amazing team of clinicians, actuaries, and data scientists. Our experience ranges from medtech, pharmaceuticals, health economics for reimbursement policies, and also background a bit in advocacy space. Our ambition as Insight Health Solutions is that we believe that everyone deserves access to quality, affordable, and patient-centered healthcare. We actively partner with our clients to provide innovative and market-leading health solutions to mitigate national and global challenges towards increasing productivity, reducing costs and wastages, and managing risks. Okay, so I'm sure everyone in this room understands that our healthcare system is quite unique. We have a 2-tiered healthcare system that faces similar challenges, from having constrained budgets in terms of how much do we allocate to healthcare and how do we spend our resources in healthcare. And then another challenge is that we're experiencing an increasing burden of diseases. For example, more recently, I think the Stats SA published that there's been a high increase in the number of people that have chronic diseases like diabetes, cancers, cardiovascular diseases, for example. And this is on top of us, as South Africa, as our healthcare system, we also continue to fight infectious diseases such as TB and HIV. So we're experiencing a bit of pressures on that side. Another challenge that we face in our healthcare system as a whole is the shortages of healthcare professionals. The Nursing Council just released a report which indicated that since 1998 until 2022, there was almost a 200% increase in the number of nurses, right? But the nurse-to-patient ratio continues to be high. And this does affect, at the end of the day, the patients in terms of how do they access care, how much time do they spend waiting to access healthcare services. The other challenge that we experience a lot in the healthcare space is the influx of new technologies. As I hope many of you are aware, since COVID-19, there's been a high adoption of digital health products in the form of telemedicine, virtual healthcare, or AI-based technologies. All of these new innovative technologies, they're also putting pressures on the healthcare system from a financing side, asking or requiring funders to decide how do we allocate finances, how do we fund virtual healthcare, how do we fund other digital health products. And all of these new, innovative, shiny technologies that we get in the healthcare market, they also increase the healthcare expenditure because as new innovative technologies or medicines are being produced in the market, there's pressure from the patient stakeholders to the funders that those new innovative products are adopted. And becomes a challenge as to how do we decide what do we actually pay for, or how do we provide the access to our patients, right? It also doesn't help that we have a two-tiered system. There's fragmentation in the system from an HTA perspective. Our system, we do some sort of HTA from private to public sector to support decision-making, but all of these activities are often duplicated. The solution that we at Insight have, or that's all been identified in the market, is using HTA as a tool to inform decision makers. So an older definition of HTA from the World Health Organization defines HTA as a systematic evaluation of properties, effects, and/or the impact of healthcare technology. It should, during this evaluation, it should include medical, social, ethical, and economic dimensions and its main purpose to inform decision-making in healthcare. But this definition was updated in 2020 by an international joint task force which included ISPO, HTAI, and other HTA agencies globally. And this definition is quite broad. It covers the evaluation of a health technology at different life cycles in its product life. And the purpose of conducting an HTA is to inform decision makers and also to promote an equitable, efficient, and high-quality healthcare system. In South Africa, HTA is not a foreign concept or a foreign topic. Since 1994, the topic or conversations around HTA have been happening. We have policy documents that have been published with, which include HTA. But it's around 2015 in the NHI white paper where we start seeing the intention to set up an HTA agency in South Africa via the National Health Insurance. And then also moving towards the 2019, when the Health Market Inquiry provided the report and recommended that the private sector or our healthcare system as a whole needs to have an HTA agency to inform decision makers on how to procure health technologies or how to allocate healthcare funds when procuring technologies. And then also, since the NHI has been proclaimed, since the NHI Act has been proclaimed recently, there's a part at the back of the NHI Act which indicates that during the implementation of the NHI, the NDOH is going to create a ministerial advocacy group which will be a precursor to an HTA agency. But after all of these conversation policy documents, we don't have an HTA agency in the country. We don't have a unified organization that does the HTA for our healthcare system. Now, that brings us to what we at Insight have. Okay, let's wait for that. What we at Insight are doing. We have a team of health economists, as we introduced ourselves, supported by our clinicians and actuaries, and our HTA process is quite systematic as per the definition, and we start from selecting the topic that will do the HTA on, because obviously we cannot assess all of the technologies because there's an influx, so it's quite important to prioritize before doing the HTA. And then we conduct the clinical evaluation of all of the available data, conduct economic evaluation, and then synthesize this information. But before we even provide a recommendation, it's quite important for us to consider what are the legal, ethical, and social considerations that we need to consider for this new technology that is coming to the market, right? And then we engage with our stakeholders to present our findings so that our recommendations are at least targeted at the healthcare system or the stakeholders that are involved in our process. And then it's also quite important in this process to reassess and monitor the HTA or the new technology in the healthcare system as to whether does it work, is it still providing the value that it was supposed or that it's been reported to provide. And this process is not only applicable to the reimbursement decision process only, but from early in the product development of a new technology, HTA is quite important because at pre-market, HTA can be helpful to inform funders of what new devices are coming in the market, just to signal to them that, hey, there's a new development that might treat cancer or obesity or cystic fibrosis. These are the trends. And also a regulation to advise the developers if the new evidence is actually showing any value for the healthcare funders. And then also I've mentioned the reassessment of the new technology. I'd like to leave you with a quote by Mark Twain. Prediction is difficult, particularly when it involves the future. But with a bit of HTA at the early production of a technology or at the initial stages, we can scan the horizon, suss out the signals, and inform funders or healthcare stakeholders of what's being developed in the healthcare industry. Now, I'd like to step away and give the stage to my colleague.
Thanks very much, Yanga. Is my mic? Yeah. So just to expand then on what Yanga was already talking about, I think this case, it was before my time at Inside Actuaries, but I think this case really was the stimulus for us thinking along the lines of we could really, I guess, contribute something to the health environment through, HTA activities. For those of you, the picture there on the right is the fundus photograph of the back of the eye, which in this case, there was a medical scheme who was taken to the council with a complaint by a patient who had been treated with first-line, I guess, prescribed minimum benefit treatment for their macular degeneration, age-related macular degeneration, and had failed on that treatment. The treatment is accepted widely as a PMB. There's very little debate. It's available in the public sector. So the original treatment was not a debate at all. Unfortunately, the second level of therapy, once you've failed, and this is a typical example of what we see, was significantly more expensive than the first-line therapy. And the scheme had declined to authorize that in this patient's case, and she had taken it off at a complaint to the Council of Medical Schemes. And after several iterations of complaint and appeal again, this eventually ended up at the Section 50 Appeals Board at the Council for Medical Schemes, who basically then said to the scheme they have to reconsider what they have said and they need to provide proof of their health technology assessment and their, in terms of the legislation, their evaluation of the affordability, cost effectiveness, and evidence base for their decision. Which is at which point, I think, when they came to Insight to get that fully done and to get it, to be a defendable level. And we were able to produce a sort of full review, including a sort of cost-effectiveness analysis, which, as you can see there, what we do is we eventually come to, in an economic review, an effective cost of this new treatment per quality-adjusted life year. That red line there was kind of the threshold that the scheme themselves, because they remain the decision maker, had set for their decision criteria. And as you can see, sort of the treatment options there were very likely to exceed that cost effectiveness threshold. And that was how they managed to defend their stance on this particular new technology. So, from our perspective, HTA has got all these great principles that lend itself to being something that we can centralize and can democratize and can sort of involve various stakeholders and make available to everyone. It's it should be a very non-emotive process, very evidence-based, very systematic, unbiased, transparent. Obviously, it has to be relevant to the stakeholders who are having to make decisions at the time. There is an element, certainly, within the health technology process that Yanga explained of generalizability and transferability. The clinical conditions and the clinical issues that are raised in a systematic review are the same, potentially, for all decision makers. Those just need to be contextualized into a particular decision-making environment. Obviously, whatever gets done needs to be done in a timely fashion. I've worked now with the Essential Medicines List group for a couple of years, and they are doing assessments of medications now that we were doing 10 years ago, sort of in the private sector. So, but what's being done at the public health sector now is working for them, but actually those evaluations have been done 10 years ago in private. So, it has to be done at the right time for the right stakeholder group as well. It does require stakeholder engagement. One cannot think that you can sit and do, health technology assessment at the computer. It does need to involve the clinicians that are involved with the new technology, as well as potentially the patients. And then there's an element of monitoring and evaluation that comes in as well. But all of these things lend themselves to sort of a centralization, a democratization, a sort of being able to share this information, because it should all be unbiased and transparent. And yet, in our environment, we kind of see the situation where these HTAs go underground. The schemes, for their own purposes, are using own versions of HTA to make their decisions, which is fantastic in a way, problematic in another way. It's important that medical scheme competition is upheld, obviously, because schemes do need to compete to attract members. The problem we're seeing is that this fragmentation, as well as sort of managed care organizations sort of competing for business, has tended, I guess, to harm this potential of joining processes together for HTA. And as a result, we're seeing duplication of work and duplication of the same processes for the same technologies by different elements in the environment. So we know there's a policy intent to move towards health technology assessment in a big way in determining the benefits for national health insurance in South Africa. We do know that we've got very limited resources and that our activities are very fragmented. There's also not a formally designated HTA institution yet, and not a single process for undertaking these HTAs. So the way we've kind of looked at it is, with a bit of a more centralized approach to the technical aspects, we believe we can sort of start to produce relevant information that's going to be able to be used by multiple stakeholders in their decision-making processes. And it will have to be just basketed and put together in the correct way to make it useful for the different decision makers with their different perspectives. So some people much cleverer than me at Insight, with sort of a governance background, have had a look at potential operations models and had a look at some of the options that we can take on here. Obviously, there's the possibility of an industry forum. I mean, we've seen those working not so well for things like P&B reviews, etc. It's a slow process. It's marginally user-friendly. Transparency can be upheld to a certain degree. At least an industry forum where it's set up by a regulator could potentially, be considered non-partisan. But we've also found that these things not necessarily binding over time. And all of those factors we've sort of used to contribute to how we see potential ease of execution in terms of a health technology assessment process. You'll see, so we've looked at industry forum, the consultancy model. Obviously, there are some health technology, typical sort of consultancy models in the market as well. The challenges there, again, the consultancy element doesn't sort of translate into something that is non-partisan necessarily, always binding, always necessarily user-friendly, because they are, the health technology assessments are developed for a particular sort of client. The institution model, probably, and this is what was suggested effectively in the health market inquiry, possibly one of the least sort of in terms of ease of execution. To set up an institution to do this purely is going to take some significant doing, so that's going to take a lot of time. Transparency, depending, I guess, on how they run their business, but we haven't really had great experience. Things like the Pharmacoeconomics Directorate of the Department of Health, transparency could be a problem. So we've judged that as potentially not so easy to execute, and eventually fallen on what we're calling an independent exchange at the moment, which is hopefully going to become something where there's sort of a non-partisan, non-biased entity kind of in the middle that is able to take information and transform it into packages which are useful to clients who will then be able to access that sort of on a free, well, not a free basis, but an open basis, and then be able to use this in decision making or sort of motivation in the environment that they are working in. So we've recognized, I think, and this is, Insight is going to be pursuing this, some critical factors for this to perhaps work for the market is that it will have to be some kind of independent exchange, hence why we've sort of taken to the word democratizing HTA, and that we will want to make it more available, or make these analyses more available to more individuals, and have it be less sort of clandestine at a medical scheme level. There are already sort of in structure, we didn't have time to present it today, but some very well-designed, deliberate governance processes that are going to be put into place. Obviously, we'll have to have a sustainable funding model for scaling this up, so that, it won't help if we produce a health technology assessment once a year. That's not going to help anyone in the decision-making process for the implementation of new technologies. We'll have to be able to scale up the volumes. And then we've sort of more recently decided on a consultative process for selection and prioritization of topics, again, to make sure that these assessments come out timeously. And so what we're toying with at the moment is this idea of an HTA library where clients will be able to go and fish out information either relevant to HTAs or the full HTAs themselves, including sort of full HTA reports, which I think for those of you that are familiar with health technology assessment, those reports can get quite hefty and quite heavy depending on what you're actually investigating in relation to the technology. Rapid reviews, because of course the technology just falls on us, and then there are methods whereby, and we use this a lot on the Essential Medicines List Committee during COVID, was rapid reviews of the new medicines that were being purported to treat COVID, but we still had to do them systematically and thoroughly. We're also looking at how we, for the whole sort of industry and our clients, produce early awareness reports that will, make, I guess, the industry aware of what is coming next, what could be the next controversial thing in the funding environment or in a technology environment, and then also looking at sort of global trends analysis, because we do, particularly in the pharmaceutical environment, we've got a couple of years buffer while our SAPRA registers a medicine, but the devices tend to come very swiftly on the heels of being available in other markets. So this is what we are busy working on now. I've been at Insight for a month and a half. Yanga's been there for 2.5 months. These ideas, other than the governance that TP had been working on before we arrived, are still relatively new. But we are actually very excited, and we really think that there's potential to improve the situation that we see with decision makers in the market at the moment. So just to leave you with a quote then, the best way to predict the future, and I guess be the change, is to create it. Thanks a lot. Thanks.